So this was a research project that was essentially looking at how this incredible ecosystem changes over a polar year. And the Arctic, as we know, is warming 3 times faster than lower climes. And we're seeing that essentially it's almost like a canary in the mine for climate change, and the effects of climate change are being seen far more clearly in the Arctic than anywhere else. And so what we wanted to do was study the way that the ecosystem actually changes now, almost like a baseline, because the Arctic is an ecosystem of extreme seasonal changes. We have this permanent darkness in the long winter, and then of course we have this incredibly extreme summer. And the major organisms that drive the productivity of the Arctic are these tiny microscopic plants, these algae that bloom in this 24-hour sunlight we see in the late spring and early summer. And this drives the entire ecosystem of the Arctic. And so any changes that we see in climate that might affect these microscopic algae and these bacteria that live in the deep water column below will have knock-on effects, we think, for everything that kind of survives and lives and feeds off these tiny organisms. Microorganisms are incredibly sensitive indicators of how the environment changes, and we're looking at different types of organisms and seeing the way that these kind of populations change as the Arctic changes itself, and we're using these essentially as kind of monitors and potentially even predictors of how the entire ecosystem, because these microscopic organisms are the basis of the food chain for the whole kind of biodiversity of this wonderful habitat, and how this might be affected, this cascade that goes up through the food chain. And we're looking at the kind of base of this first to see what might and predict what might actually happen. I grew up as a young boy reading these fabulous novels of Jules Verne and these adventures, and I think every scientist yearns to be the person that discovers something that nobody else has ever discovered. And the Arctic feels like this region that is still utterly undiscovered, and when you fly into Svalbard for the first time, you really do feel like you're flying back in time. It's an incredible ecosystem, and scientifically there's so little that we know about the Arctic. It's very difficult to get to. It's very expensive to do research up there, and obviously a lot of the research we do is the funding is provided through agencies that are trying to increase our understanding of the area. In terms of the kind of non-scientific reasons that I might be excited to go there, it's a chance to see this almost pristine environment. Unfortunately, of course, we see that it's no longer pristine. We're now seeing the effects of kind of anthropogenic pollution, plastics especially, reaching even these remote Arctic shores. But there's still these wonderful opportunities where a whale will break the surface just off the research vessel, or you'll be lucky enough to see a polar bear and her cubs walking along the shoreline, or in our case, huge schools of whistling white whales kind of rubbing their bellies along the gravel by the shoreline, and things like this are absolutely precious and remind you of why you kind of got into science in the first place.